COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions. Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
What a great sentiment. Let's get back to some of the things we miss and enjoy. Good afternoon and welcome to Facts, Fears, and Honest Dialogue, COVID-19 vaccines in the Black music community. My name is Dr. Renee Matthews, and I am a medical educator and host of Out of Office with Dr. Renee. Today's event is presented by MusiCares in partnership with the Ad Council. As many of you know, MusiCares provides music people a support system of health and human services across a spectrum of needs, including physical and mental health, addiction, recovery, preventative clinics, unforeseen personal emergencies, and disaster relief, including COVID-19 relief. MusiCares helps the humans behind the music because music gives so much to the world. For more information about MusiCares, please visit musicares.org. We've all been impacted by COVID-19. And the music and entertainment industries have been especially hard hit by this. But now vaccines are becoming available, and there are a lot of questions, especially in the Black community, about what that means. So today we're going to talk about all of that.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family.
And try
now
to
it's
get
time
to
to take the
facts
first
so
step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. Before we can safely come together,
now to get us started, let me first
As
welcome
COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions. Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now,
Dre is a
get the
partner of
facts
Supergiant
at
Records
getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available
having
to
worked
you.
with several well-known artists, including Brandy, Keisha Cole, and Estelle. Dre, as a music tour manager, what are some of the challenges you've experienced during COVID-19?
Well, the biggest challenge is there's been no tours at all. The complete shutdown of the music industry has actually allowed me to shift my business to actually start a record label.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah.
And now that phased reopenings are happening across the country, what are some of the questions you and other music managers are looking to understand about how the COVID vaccine rollout will impact your work?
Well, doing some research, we found out that, there are some protocols that we'll have to have in place, like, maybe someone who is skilled with COVID protocols as far as, making sure that backstage is sanitized and, certain artists are, equipped and wearing masks, throughout the backstage area. So it's still kind of something that we're working on and figuring out. But I definitely want to make sure that I was vaccinated just in case anything started to happen.
What a great sentiment. Let's get back to some of the things we miss and enjoy. Good afternoon and welcome to Facts, Fears, and Honest Dialogue, COVID-19 vaccines in the Black music community. My name is Dr. Renee Matthews, and I am a medical educator and host of Out of Office with Dr. Renee. Today's event is presented by MusiCares in partnership with the Ad Council. As many of you know, MusiCares provides music people a support system of health and human services across a spectrum of needs, including physical and mental health, addiction, recovery, preventative clinics, unforeseen personal emergencies, and disaster relief, including COVID-19 relief. MusiCares helps the humans behind the music because music gives so much to the world. For more information about MusiCares, please visit musicares.org. We've all been impacted by COVID-19, and the music and entertainment industries have been especially hard hit by this. But now vaccines are becoming available, and there are a lot of questions, especially in the Black community, about what that means. So today, we're going to talk about all of that, our experiences, our questions, our concerns, and try to get to the facts so that we can make informed decisions about what's best for us and for our health. Now, to get us started, let me first welcome Dre Davis.
Hello.
Hi. Dre is a partner of Supergiant Records and is an established tour manager and artist development expert, having worked with several well-known artists, including Brandy, Keisha Cole, and Estelle. Dre, as a music tour manager, what are some of the challenges you've experienced during COVID-19?
Well, the biggest challenge is there's been no tours at all. The complete shutdown of the music industry has actually allowed me to shift my business to actually start a record label.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah.
So, and now that phased reopenings are happening across the country, what are some of the questions you and other music managers are looking to understand about how the COVID vaccine rollout will impact your work?
Well, doing some research, we found out that, there are some protocols that we'll have to have in place, like, maybe someone who is skilled with COVID protocols as far as, making sure that backstage is sanitized and, certain artists are, equipped and wearing masks, throughout the backstage area. So it's still kind of something that we're working on and figuring out. But I definitely want to make sure that I was vaccinated just in case anything started to happen to where we can really start back touring.
Great. Thank you. Emil, you're next. I'd like to bring Emil Wilbekin.
Hey there.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Emil is an editor, journalist, pop culture expert, media professional, and content curator, and is the founder of Native Son, a platform created to inspire and empower Black gay men. Emil, we know that COVID-19 has been especially impactful on the Black community and other marginalized communities, which has exposed many weaknesses in our healthcare system that support these communities. In your view, what accounts for these disparities in healthcare services in communities of color?
Well, I think the biggest challenge we face, Dr. Renee, is that as Black folks and people of color, we don't have access to healthcare in many areas, especially like in rural areas in the South, where we've seen the COVID numbers hit really, really hard and really high. And we've seen higher number of deaths among African Americans in the United States. And there's a lot of issues. There's privilege, there's employment, there's all types of things. And even in the LGBTQ plus community, we've been hit extra hard as well because, again, essential workers, frontline workers, people that have to work in grocery stores and be there out on the front lines are more vulnerable to the virus. And so that has been an issue, particularly in the Black community. We have to be out there working. We have families. We have to take care of ourselves. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't have the privilege to just sit at home. And like Dre said, like many businesses have been impacted. So people have to then figure out other ways to work. And if you don't have healthcare, there's another additional challenge to that.
Thank you, Emil. Next, I'd like to bring in Anthony Hamilton. Anthony is the Grammy Award-winning multi-platinum singer, songwriter, producer, actor, and author whose new single, Mercy, featuring Tamika D. Mallory, is a powerful anthem combining art and activism while touching on many of the feelings we've experiencing during this turbulent year. Anthony, you've been very involved in COVID-19 relief efforts over the last year, even hosting a series of live streamed concerts to encourage social distancing. but this is likely the longest amount of time you and other musicians have gone without being able to perform live in public. How are you doing?
I'm good. I actually had COVID in December and was hospitalized for about 2 weeks. And so I know it quite well. But prior to that, being home and being, close to the house and able to rest was okay until things prolonged itself. And, you start to wonder, will I be able to make ends meet, or will my band members be able to make ends meet? So as a CEO of my own company and a touring company, you start to have that worry and, the challenges of making sure not just yourself, but your peers and everybody else are well.
I'm glad that you're feeling much better. Thank you, Anthony. Now I'd like to bring in Dr. Jane Middlebrooks Morgan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good.
Dr. Morgan is a cardiologist and the clinical director of the COVID task force at the Piedmont Healthcare Corporation in Atlanta, Georgia, where she works on developing their ongoing African-American community outreach and whose research analyzes the science and data from Piedmont and the nationally surrounding the disproportionately negative impact of COVID-19 on minority communities. Dr. Morgan, you focus on inequalities in clinical research. There's so much misinformation about these inequalities, especially in the Black community. Can you briefly talk about the issues historically?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's specifically when we look at these COVID vaccines, the COVID vaccines represent that triumvirate, this intersection of the three tips of the triangle that really impact the relationships of Black people with, number one, the healthcare system, which is somewhat of a distant relationship. And then we involve research with the development of these COVID vaccines, where we have even a less of a relationship. And then it also involves the United States government, which, as we know, we also have an uneasy relationship and was certainly responsible for the oversight of the Tuskegee experiment, of which we are all very familiar. So it shouldn't be a surprise that when these vaccines rolled out and were introduced to America and to the world, that there's vaccine hesitancy. I would maybe say neverency amongst some of us with regard to how are we going to accept and understand these vaccines when all three aspects of the triangle come together for the development of these vaccines.
How are these considerations taken into account in the development of the COVID-19 vaccines?
So in the development of the vaccine, one thing that we should understand, and many people think, these vaccines sort of appeared overnight. They appeared over a year. But the SARS-CoV-2 virus, severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2, which is the virus responsible for the disease COVID-19, is so named because this is the second time that we have seen it. The first time that we saw it was in a SARS outbreak of 2003. Severe acute respiratory syndrome. Since that time, we've had 17 years to study this family of coronaviruses. We even had another outbreak of the MERS virus in 2012, Middle Eastern respiratory virus, that was largely contained to Saudi Arabia. So in these 17 years, we completed all of the preclinical work, all of the bench research. We identified the spike protein as the primary nidus for transferring infection. We identified the mechanism of action of that spike protein binding to ACE inhibitors on our cells, angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors. We also identified the entire genomic sequence, all 30,000 base pairs. All of that had been done before we even had the very first case of COVID-19 on our shores. So we developed this vaccine with 17 years of history behind the scenes of scientists working. And then it went live in 2020.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Next, I'd like to bring in Daryl DMC McDaniels. DMC is 1/3 of the groundbreaking, multi-platinum and Grammy Award-winning rap group Run-DMC and is currently part of the Community Immunity Vaccine Education Initiative launched by Hip Hop Public Health. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
DMC, you've been doing a lot of work over the last year using hip hop to inform and encourage people to take action around social distancing, mask wearing, and now the vaccines. Why was it important for you as an artist to get involved with educating people on the facts?
Because basically music succeeds where politics and religion fails. If you look at the history of music, whether it was a war, whether it was racial equality, civil rights, women's rights, from this all the way from the 50s to the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and especially with hip hop, it's okay to be rapping and making records, but we have a responsibility to the people in the audience and to the people in our community. So when Dr. Williams and Dougie Fresh and Chuck D approached me to use this wonderful gift of hip hop to speak facts and speak the truth, especially when it comes to health-related issues that affect our community, the King of Rock had to step in, because a lot of times it's the arts that educate and inform way better sometimes than people listening to the news or reading a book. So we have a gift and we have a responsibility to be the spokespeople, the spokesperson for the people in the community, so that there's always a misconception, there's always confusion, and there's always fear. And one thing hip hop does is keep it real. So with that integrity, with that foundation of a Chuck D, a DMC, a Dougie Fresh, a Salt from Salt and Pepper, and a Shanti, when we speak, we're not going to support anything that's going to be detrimental or that's going to jeopardize our community's health. And secondly, we are only going to join forces with people, doctors and scientists, who are going to tell us the truth. And for me, it's crazy. I did the video about the vaccine, and people are telling me, I hope you die. You are selling. Yeah. I mean, it's so bad. But I didn't let that deter me. We have to fight fear with the facts.
Thank you so much, DMC. Finally, I'd like to bring in Dr. Olajide Williams. Did I say it right?
It's Olajide
Williams. Been working on that. Dr. Williams is a tenured professor of neurology at Columbia University and chief of staff at the Department of Neurology at New York Presbyterian Columbia University Irving Medical Center. Dr. Williams is the founder of Hip Hop Public Health, an organization dedicated to fostering positive health behavior change through the power of science and hip hop music. Dr. Williams, everyone, musicians and music fans, want to get back to being able to enjoy live music again. Now that we have vaccines, that seems like it could be possible soon. But we have seen that getting the vaccine has been difficult. What do you see as the greatest hurdles of getting the vaccines out to people as quickly as possible?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. So I think there are a few hurdles. I think there's a supply side, and then there's the demand side, and then there's the operational side in between those two things. And so on the supply side, you see in many cities across the country, you see a insufficient supply of the vaccines. And then on the operational side, you see real challenges for everyday people, especially in our communities, to just getting to vaccine distribution sites. And so what we need is, one, to make it easier for people to be able to get the vaccine. And to do that, we need to have many more vaccine sites in our neighborhoods. We need to have a vaccine site on every block if we can. This should be as easy as going to the pharmacy to get a shot. We should have even visiting nurses go into people's homes, especially old and elderly people who are frail and can't move around in these temperatures. We need to have people who can go and administer it to them at home. We need to think about mobile vans, mobile vaccination vans that can go park outside different blocks and give people the vaccine. So I think we need to really reimagine the way we distribute this vaccine and the access that we provide for this vaccine. And then the final thing is the issue of hesitancy. DMC touched on just the war out there around hesitancy. So I think we need to really partner more intimately with community leaders and artists who really support and embrace this mission, and let our community know that the only way we're going to get out of this pandemic is to vaccinate our way out of this pandemic.
That's a great point, Dr. Williams. Thank you. So now I'd like to move to a conversation with everyone. And to start, we have some questions already, but if you guys have any questions in the audience, do me a huge favor. And if you're watching on Facebook or if you're on YouTube, type it in the comments and we'll have somebody send those to us and we'll try to get those answered for you today. Do we have any questions coming? Hopefully we do. We'll see. So, so I'll give this one to Dre. What is it that the music community needs to be aware of? Like with COVID-19, what do you think, especially as a tour manager, what do you think that they're going to need, especially going out on the road?
I mean, the easy answer is they need to be vaccinated. Everyone needs to really take this very seriously. If you're on the road and you're around thousands and thousands of people, and then you come home off the road, you're going to put your family, your friends, all types of people at a risk. So, that would be my main sticking point is get vaccinated.
And DMC, I'm sure you have the same sentiment since you've already been working with immunity in the community. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Yes, and also we have to continue the cleanliness practices. See, when this vaccine first hit, it seems like we had to remind people of something that it doesn't matter what generation you come from. 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years ago, when you came in the house, or you went in your grandmother's house, or your aunt's house, or your mother's, what did your parents tell you to do? Wash your hands. You know what I'm saying? So Doc had to come up with this idea. They just ain't kidding. We got to make a hip hop song to tell people to wash their hands. And because it was hip hop or rock and roll or reggae, whatever, people started paying attention. But when this vaccine, when everybody's vaccinated, when we go back out on the road, in order to make sure that we continue to be safe, we must continue to be cautious. And not even just for COVID. I work with a man named Larry Hammer. He's 70 years old, and he's like the guy that resurrected G.I. Joe. He works for a comic book company. And he said, the beautiful thing about what's going on right now, I haven't caught a cold this year. You know what I'm saying? He's like, I'm going to go get my shot. Yes, exactly. So once we get through this pandemic, we have to continue to be respectful of our boundaries and other people's boundaries. And we just have to pay attention. And one of the things that I really think that's have to happen, the COVID hit, I mean, it's heartbreaking and everything, but we're starting to develop, we're starting to care for each other a little more.
Yes.
We're starting to worry about, we're reaching out to people we haven't talked to in years. And the other day, me and my son was crossing the street and this car was coming down the hill speeding. It was like, 2015 BMW, music playing loud. And me and my son, we was like in the middle of the road and the car stopped. And it was a young guy, and he politely said, you can proceed. And we was like, thank you. And when we crossed the street, my son just said, Dad, this is beautiful. This pandemic is bringing us together. All the stuff that's happening with the Black Lives Matters, we starting to care and, paying attention more. But he said, I hope this continues when this is over. So everything that we're doing, medically, for people's mental health right now, that's a huge concern, and the pandemic added to that anxiety and stuff like that. So what we have to do when we go back out on the road, even in the gym that I go to now, people put the weights back. You know what I'm saying? People say, excuse me. People say,
and
no.
They're actually wiping machines down. You just have to keep up with that.
So we must continue to do what we're doing now.
Dr. Morgan, this question I believe is for you. Somebody in the audience would like to know which vaccine is best.
So when we look at the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, both of these are messenger RNA vaccines. So this is a new platform that we have not seen before. Previously, we used live attenuated viruses. So these were vaccines that were made from the actual virus, but weakened to the point that they didn't make you sick, but they were enough to stimulate your immune system to develop a defense, antibodies. So when we look at Moderna and Pfizer, and these are the first two, and certainly we have Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Novavax, a host of others that are coming on board, there are not really major differences. Pfizer's vaccine, 2 shots, you take it 21 days apart, and then there's another 1 week before you reach full immunity at 95% efficacy, meaning how well it works. And then the Moderna vaccine, you take 4 weeks apart, and then it requires another 2 weeks after that second shot to reach that 94.5 to 95% efficacy. So Moderna requires 6 weeks to reach full immunity. Pfizer requires 4 weeks. Their safety profiles are fairly similar: nausea, vomiting, headaches, chills, fever, myalgias, meaning muscle aches, injection site pain. So their side effect profiles and their safety profiles are fairly similar. So I would suggest and recommend that whichever vaccine you have access to and that is offered to you, that you move forward with that one.
So we have another question from the audience. I think Dr. Williams, this might be a good one for you. I read an article recently describing how the Native American community increased trust in the vaccine by vaccinating their community elders, such as those that speak their native languages. Do you think a similar method would assist in building trust in the Black community?
Yeah, I mean, I think any member of a community that's respected has influence, and so if we have respected elderly members of the Black community that are vaccinated, they can influence a lot of people around them because a lot of people look up to them. It's one of the reasons why we've been approaching and partnering with churches all over this country. We had a vaccine drive at Abyssinian Baptist Church just recently. We're working with Reverend Butts. We have Convent Avenue Baptist Church is about to come online. So we're partnering with different churches in the neighborhood because we recognize that they are trusted and they have a lot of capital in the community. So absolutely, I agree that is one approach.
Dr. Morgan, some seem fearful of the 2 vaccines available now and want to wait for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Is there any validity to those concerns?
So I would suggest that whatever vaccine becomes available to you, you take the vaccine. The Moderna and Pfizer trials were done looking at 2 dose regimens. And although there is discussion regarding whether one vaccine may be sufficient, the fact of the matter is the data that we have that was submitted to the FDA that provided emergency use authorization for these vaccines was done based on data from 2 doses. So all of our recommendations are based on the data from those trials from 2 doses. And that is why we're trying to stick to this as closely as possible. When we look at the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that should be coming out under emergency use authorization next week, it is somewhat different in that its efficacy is at 72% in the United States, whereas Moderna and Pfizer is at 94.5 and 95%. But that being said, we don't believe that's something that should concern you, because at 85% efficacy of reducing and eliminating all deaths and all severe, moderate to severe disease. The other thing that we need to think about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is when those clinical trials were being done, these mutations that we hear about now from South Africa, Brazil, UK, were prevalent and therefore involved in their trial. So their efficacy represents the presence of those mutations, whereas Moderna and Pfizer's trials closed before those mutations were available. And so their data is based on the mutations that were in the environment at that time. Currently, they are looking at developing other formulations. That's why you hear information of, do we need a 3rd shot? Will there be a booster? Because they're looking at formulations that incorporate antibody neutralizing antibodies against these new mutations. Again, what I would say, because vaccine is scarce, that if you have an opportunity to receive a vaccine, no matter which one it is, you should receive that vaccine and feel confident.
Dre, what are the conversations that you're having with your peers on this?
It was interesting when I posted that I got the vaccine on Instagram. I was hoping, okay, I really wanted to ask the question, like, are you getting vaccinated? Then it was so interesting to see how many people said, no, good for you. A lot of people were like, okay, that's amazing. You made me feel like I should go and get it. So then, it's been about a 50-50. Could be the person. So at least people who be comfortable,
Oh, did we lose them?
Did y'all hear me?
Okay, we heard it was breaking up a little bit, but we heard
Hello?
most of
Did y'all
that.
hear?
Can you hear us?
Okay.
You okay?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can hear you now.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry.
No,
about
it's
that.
okay. Emil, in your view, what are the biggest challenges around getting accurate information about COVID-19 to Black people and other marginalized communities?
Well, I think I agree with what a lot of people are saying. I think part of it is getting the information out and just being really clear, but I think about it this way. When the vaccines first were announced, I didn't know if I would get it. I thought I would wait and see. And then I started thinking about the fact of how many Black people's lives we've lost, right? And how it's impacting our community. And I thought, well, like, I'm HIV positive, so I take medication every single day. So getting a vaccine, like, that's not going to hurt me, right? That's going to help me and it's going to protect me. And so I had a similar situation to Dre, where when I, started telling people that I was vaccinated, they were like some people were giving me crickets. So I just was like, okay, that should be yay, not crickets. But I think in terms of information, there's so much information out there. Roundtables like this are very helpful because I think, everyone goes to the Tuskegee situation, right? Which was a very specific case in time and history. But the fact that there are actually white people who are going to Black neighborhoods to get the vaccines and the overflow, we need to think about it from that perspective. They're not scared to take the vaccines. Why are we being scared?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they're going into our neighborhoods to do it. So I live in Chicago, and I've heard that it's just crazy how they're going way to the south side. And it's like, really? All the way from the north side? And then there's more of them in line than us. So
Right.
You need to look at that. You're right. So Dr. Morgan, I think this is another one for you. Are certain vaccines better than others against the new variants? And I think you touched on this a bit because obviously Johnson & Johnson is just coming out and they have had tests on these new variants, but Moderna and Pfizer?
Yes. So Johnson & Johnson's trials were done while those variants were circulating, and they're circulating now. And we think that that's responsible for the reduced efficacy that we see of that vaccine. So the vaccine has reduced, it's not as effective as Moderna and Pfizer. And we think that the reason for that is because of all of these new variants that were out. That being said, I really didn't necessarily want to use not as effective because it's very effective in reducing and eliminating hospitalization and death. And that's really the key. So you can still get COVID, but you won't get sick enough to be hospitalized nor end up in the morgue. And so we are really excited to add this vaccine to our armamentarium. The other thing that I will say about mutations is when we think about mutations, we think about things getting bigger and scarier, but really it just means change in science. And so this virus has changed or mutated almost 3,000 times since we've seen it. So we need to really think about that. In the US, we've done so little genomic tracing of the mutations that are in our environment. And when I say so little, I mean 0.3%, less than 1%. So while we're focused on the UK, Brazil, and South Africa and what those variants are, at least they know what's in their environment and they've been tracing it. We don't even know what's here. Less than 1% have we done adequate genomic tracing. So we are behind. This has been an inadequate vaccine rollout and an inadequate management really of the COVID pandemic.
So maybe you know this, maybe Dr. Williams, why does it appear that more people are having flu-like symptoms after the second vaccine of Moderna?
Great. I just want to double back on something that was just said. So we have to understand mutations. That's what viruses do. They mutate. They mutate all the time. In fact, a colleague of mine, David Ho at Columbia, I was just in a meeting with him talking about his new variant that was reported across all the news sites yesterday, the New York City variant. And we're still learning about it. David was telling us about the nature of this new variant, just discovered, and we think it's probably about 12 to 28% of cases in New York, and we're seeing it in older people. So the point is that the viruses mutate all the time. That is what they do. The important thing for the public to understand is that the longer we allow this pandemic to continue, right, the longer it goes on for, unchecked, the more time the virus has, the more time and opportunity the virus has to replicate. And the more time and opportunity that the virus has to replicate, the more time and opportunity the virus has to mutate. And the more time and opportunity the virus has to mutate into these new variants, the possibility of one of these variants being able to evade our immune system, evade our vaccines, becomes higher and higher and higher. That is why we have to basically vaccinate our way through this pandemic as quickly as possible. Okay, so now back to your question about the flu-like symptoms. A couple of things I want to say about that. These flu-like symptoms are actually what we refer to as reactogenicity. And it's a normal response it's a normal immune response to being vaccinated. In some cases, it shows that our immune system is really working. And so they're transient. They usually last between 24 and 48 hours. Most of us, remember 41 million plus people in America have been vaccinated and 16 have had at least 2 doses. So most people who get the vaccine have these transient symptoms. They're really nothing to worry about. They pass very quickly, and they're really a sign of reactogenicity that your body is really, really, really working. And so I don't want people to get caught up in those flu-like symptoms. What we need to get caught up in is how quickly we all need to get vaccinated so that we can prevent these, one of these mutations is going to be a real problem in the future if we don't get each other. And I just told you, I just got off a meeting with David Ho at Columbia. We were just talking about the New York City variant. You guys are going to be seeing it in the news every day for the next few weeks.
Thank you. So a lot of people have questions out, like they said, okay, we got a vaccine. So does that mean that we won't get sick? Well, Dr. Morgan did cover that you still might get sick. You might not get sick enough that you need to go to the hospital, or you end up dead. So that's a good thing. The vaccines are safe. They are not, and I've heard strange things about they're using humans and babies or something. The vaccines are safe, correct?
So when we look at the FDA briefing documents, and again, I'll go back to Moderna and Pfizer because these are the 2 vaccines that are available. When we look at the data from the FDA briefing documents from those 2 companies, 70,000 people, 30,000 patients in the Moderna trial, 40,000 in the Pfizer trial in these phase 3 trials. When I looked at those documents and specifically looked at the African-American subpopulation within this data, that group was the only group of vaccines that had 95% efficacy, where 2 weeks following the second dose, there were 0 incidences of COVID. What that means is, even though the vaccine is 95% efficacious, the African-American data within those FDA briefing documents demonstrated 100% efficacy in this group. Additionally, Moderna enrolled 10.3% African Americans in the trial. Pfizer enrolled between 9.3 and 9.8%. And while we represent 13.4% of the population, and they certainly fell short of that representation, they actually did a very good job because by and large, because of our history of historical atrocities, we don't participate in clinical trials. And so actually, I've never seen a clinical trial that was not specifically developed for African Americans where we have participated at such a high numbers. additionally think when we're talking about a volume of 70,000 people, when on average 10% of that population was African American, that's still 7,000 of us. So I think we should feel confident that the data that was presented to the FDA, for which we received emergency use authorization, is not only relevant, but it's relevant to our population as well.
We had lost Anthony, but he's back. So Anthony, there he is. So welcome back.
Yes.
What needs to happen for you and other musicians around COVID-19 in order for live entertainment to be able to bounce back from this past year?
Yeah, you know, people to be healthy, the environment to be healthy, and people to feel safe again. I think with that, we can move on, but it's going to take either getting the vaccine or whatever makes you happy. You know, I've been on the fence with it. I'm from the old school, and you know, we've been through a lot. So trusting the medical field and doctors and stuff, it's been a challenge.
Right.
You know, we've been attacked and used for guinea pigs, and so we're not that comfortable. The Black community is not that comfortable to trust. I had COVID actually, 2 weeks in the hospital, and you know, being healthy and eating good, you know, helped save my life and my faith in God. But you know, they asked me about it. I haven't taken it, and I'm still learning more about it. But I won't come on here and be phony and to tell everybody to take it when I'm not 100% sure about it myself. But we do need to find a way to get everybody back to health. And it could be the vaccine, could be broccoli, who knows?
So Dre, I've heard rumors that some venues, this is a question from the audience, that some venues may require proof of vaccination before admission. Is that true? And how does that make you feel personally as it relates to being in the industry?
I don't know if it's true, but from a personal standpoint, I wouldn't be mad at that, only because it's kind of like to what the doctors were saying, like we have to be safe. And in order for us to get back to a point where we can tour, we can just go out to dinner, you know what I'm saying, with our friends and family. Like you just have to, you know, have courage, you know what I'm saying, to be able to take some steps. And then to go out, just maybe a little bit irresponsible because you may catch it. And like I said, pass it along to friends and family. So, you know, that would be my take on that.
So I'm back to some of the other questions that we've heard a lot in the Black community. What side effects can we expect? Dr. Williams covered that. You might get some flu-like symptoms, but 24 to 48 hours is nothing compared to Anthony's 2 weeks, I think. So we should be okay with that, right?
And I'd just like to add to that, one thing that we should think about that maybe a lot of people don't know about is this concept of long haul syndrome. You may or may not have heard of it. But long haul syndrome is where you develop symptoms after you have recovered from COVID. Long-term symptoms, we're seeing them up to 9 months. And actually, the other doctor who's a neurologist can probably speak to this much more clearly, because a lot of these neurologic symptoms. What happens is you can develop loss of taste or smell. You can develop head. You can develop what we call brain fog, disorientation, difficulty with your memory, or things that are even more physically serious, like inflammation of your heart, inflammation of your lung. But the point that I'm trying to make is that these symptoms, this development of this long haul syndrome occurs in 30% of people who have had COVID-19, and it's regardless of the severity of your disease. So regardless of whether you were hospitalized or whether you felt home and you were video games and just sort of marking time for 14 days till you were free again. So it's independent of the severity of your disease. It cuts across racial lines, it cuts across genetic, it cuts across gender, it cuts across socioeconomic. And so think of the vaccine as well. If you can get the vaccine, not only can you protect yourself from COVID, you can also protect yourself from this long haul syndrome, for which we cannot identify yet which patients will go on to develop this or not.
And I want to say a few things. I hope you don't mind. So I'm really sympathetic to to a lot of people who have hesitancy and anxiety about the vaccine. Look, man, I had COVID. You know, I've been on the front lines. I've seen a lot of death and disability that I don't wish on anybody. This is what I do. But I also want to say this, that people need to understand, and I'm trying to get people to understand the facts. Mm-hmm. And number one is that, you know, the vaccines, there were a lot of Black scientists. This is not Tuskegee. This is not eugenics. This is not Dr. Marion Sims. This is very different. There are a lot of Black doctors, a lot of Black scientists today that are in the medical profession, like me and thousands of my colleagues. Many of us were involved in developing the vaccine. Many of us were involved in testing the vaccine. In fact, Dr. Kizzy Corbett, her lab, one of the most beautiful, brilliant Black women in this country, her lab was involved in inventing one of these vaccines. All of us Black doctors were members of the National Medical Association. All of us have looked independently at the data. We have all taken the shots ourselves, and nobody's paying us to be friends to the pharmaceutical. We don't care about the pharmaceutical company. We're not going to do anything to ourselves. You know, we've all taken the vaccine, and thousands of Black doctors everywhere in this country are telling our patients that it is safe. It's safe because we've had it. It's safe because people have been 1 year in March next month, people will have had this vaccine for 1 year, right? 42 million people have had it. We're tracking every side effect. There's a database for reporting adverse events. We're tracking all this data. We are independently, so that we don't get any nonsense, any fake stuff from people we don't trust. We, the Black Doctors Associations, are reviewing every inch of this data, and we are recommended to our communities. So I just want to say to those people who are, you know, look, when someone comes to the emergency room and they're sick, and I'm saying, I got to give you a shot, they don't ask me, hey, what's in that shot? Right. You know, when you go to the dentist and you're going to get some Novocaine, you're going to say, well, what's in that Novocaine? You know, we are generally trusted because we are the guardians of life. It's the oath that we take. I'm not speaking for other types of doctors. I'm speaking for Black doctors like myself, right? Who, you know, I live in Harlem. I've been here forever. So we are not going to recommend something that is unsafe to our people. And so all of us are getting together, you know, and we're trying to have that conversation so that whatever fears you have, ask us about it, and we will be more than happy to address these fears with you.
We have another question from the audience. After this round of vaccines, will we need another in a few years?
So that's the question that I was addressing. We don't have immunity data because this came under emergency use authorization. Without emergency use authorization, we would have had to wait another 1 or 2 years for immunity data. So what do we have available? We had all the safety data available, all of the efficacy data, meaning how well it worked, and the FDA required 2 months of immunity data. So we followed those 70,000 people up for 2 months to determine if they still had immunity, and then we were granted emergency use authorization. At this point, we have about 6 months of immunity data. So every month, we have another month of immunity data. We're following these 70,000 people. So next month, we'll have another month. So we actually can't give you the answer to that. We're all in this in real time. Additionally, we're in a race against these mutations, against these variants, against these strains. As this virus continues to change and struggle to live, all life on Earth works to move forward. And so we are in a race, humans are in a race against this. And we have to remember that human beings are part of the life cycle of this virus. We are the host. So we have to remove ourselves from this life cycle such that the virus can die out. We do that with vaccines, and we do that with public health measures, wearing our masks, washing our hands, practicing social distancing. So stay tuned for that immunity data on whether or not we will require a booster dose or whether this will be a yearly shot like the flu, whether more mutations continue to evolve. And so the companies are required to continue to reformulate their vaccines, requiring us then to get a third shot such that we can cover all of the mutations that have developed since our second shot. That's why it's imperative that we all become immunized as quickly as possible so we can reach that key level of herd immunity and we can decrease the replication of this virus.
Someone did ask in the audience, what exactly is herd immunity? Could you quickly tell us, Dr. Morgan?
So herd immunity is a concept that actually came from cattle, right? So cowpox and cattle. And depending on if you have enough cattle in your herd that are immune to a certain disease, then those who are not immune are still protected because the disease never penetrates the herd, because so many people around you are protected and they never get the disease. So you never get the disease because it can never be passed on to you. There's a certain tipping point of that, and you'll hear those numbers shift. Is it 72? Is it 80? Is it 85? We're looking to determine, but at some point we reach that sweet spot where enough people have been immunized that it protects those who haven't. Because, you know, don't forget, we always have some people in our society who are vulnerable and for a number of reasons maybe would not get the vaccines, and we need to be able to protect them as well. And the final thing that I'll say, because somebody mentioned HIV, I wanted to say in the Moderna trials, when we look at the data, when we talk about chronic medical conditions, 176 people with HIV were included. We had over 1,400 people with lung disease, over 1,400 people with heart disease, 20,000 people were obese. When we talk about diabetes, over 3,000 people, high blood pressure, almost 9,000 people, any form of cancer whatsoever, almost 1,400 people. So we should feel confident that many of these chronic medical conditions that concern people, while they were not specifically studied in these trials, they were not excluded either. They were represented in these trials. And people with chronic medical conditions, we specifically want to step up and take these vaccines, because if you are infected with COVID, your risk of more severe complications from the disease and death are higher than those people in the population without chronic diseases.
Just want to quickly simplify herd immunity. So we like to call herd immunity community immunity. The reason why, and I'm just going to take the 80% mark, we need to have 80% of every community vaccinated or immune in order for us to get out of this pandemic. 80% of us. And let's give you a quick example. Let's say the Upper East Side, where all the rich white folks live, let's say they're all immune. And then Spanish Harlem, they're not immune. So you have Upper East Side, you have 80% and they're doing well. You have folks in Spanish Harlem, they say 20% because they're not taking the vaccine. They're not really happy about it. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is that the virus is going to continue to devastate Spanish Harlem. The people on the Upper East Side are going to be doing well because they're vaccinated and protected. Check this out, though. Mutations. Remember I said replicate, mutate. The mutations start to take a hold of Spanish Harlem. Before you know it, you get a variant coming out of Spanish Harlem because it's just cooking in there, cooking. You got a variant coming out of Spanish Harlem, and what does that variant do? Perhaps it's resistant. Perhaps the vaccine doesn't work against it. Then that variant now creeps into the Upper East Side, and now what happens? Now the Upper East Side, their vaccines don't work, and we're back to square one. And I will never be able to go watch a DMC concert again because we're back to square one, right? We're back to square one. We need everybody. We need community immunity, because the only way we get out of this is if we get out of it together. If there are some people who are refusing it, it's just going to prolong it for everybody else. And then the new strains will come out, and then we'll be waiting for the next vaccine that actually kills the new strain. So look, this is deep, and we need to have these conversations so people understand how deep this is. And look, people like me who are on the front lines, you know, I've seen the reason why I'm passionate about this is because I'm in the business of saving lives, right? COVID lives. That's what I do at the front lines. And so that's why I'm passionate about this. So I'm just pleading with people. Please get the vaccine. You do not want to see me in the emergency room.
So the non-medical people, Emil, Dre, DMC, for the three of you that have been the DMC, I don't know if you've been vaccinated.
Not yet. I'm getting docs making sure I get vaccinated and my family. Can I say something real quick?
Well, I wanted to see what have you been telling people to convince them? I want to know what have you been saying to them to convince them to get it, get vaccinated, or to get the information?
Well, I could say I live by example. I mean, because I could go out there and say all this, but I had to go to South Sudan a couple of years ago. I had to go to South Sudan to go perform and do what I love. So doctors told me, before you go there, you got to go get 7 shots. I was like, what? 7 shots? Yeah, 7 shots. And they told me there might be side effects or whatever. So I went and they got 7 shots so I could go over to Africa, the motherland, South Sudan, to do what I love doing. So if they're going to tell me now I got to take a shot here at home, but why is that important? See, I had to go somewhere and take shots to protect me. But now the virus has come to my front door. So if you think that I'm not going to take 1 or 2 shots to continue to rock the house with my brothers and sisters like Chuck D and Dave DeVaro and Sebastian Bach because the virus is hell, if I took 7 to go to Africa, why do you think? And they all looked at me. They couldn't say nothing. And then the other thing, when me and Doc was recording the record Community Immunity, Doc came in, my son was there. My son was trying to hate and stuff like that. And Doc just schooled us. And one of the questions was, how did you feel after that? And Doc talked about his symptoms. And I was funny. I said, Doc, is it kind of like how you feel after you eat a big meal? He said, yes, because when you eat a big meal, you get tired and your muscles hurt because digestion, that's your body working. And Doc said, yes. So I tell them, yo, if you're generally healthy and in good condition, you're going to feel like you just ate a Thanksgiving dinner. But you should go get this. I got 7 to go to Africa. You don't think I'm going to take 2 to rock here and see y'all in the crowd where I can high-five you and have my sweat and stuff going all over the place? So that's the real example. I live by example. I wouldn't be with Doc, Chuck D, Dougie Fresh. So everybody that's rolling with the Doc would not be involved with hip hop. We talk about obesity. We talk about diabetes. Me and Doc just did a song about sugar to tell the little kids about sugar. We talk about hypertension. We talk about depression. So this COVID thing comes into our world. You think we ain't going to get on the front lines and fight the fear with the facts? I wouldn't be here today if my man, the doctor, wasn't a doctor who loved his people.
Thank you. That's awesome. Emil, please tell me, how have you been convincing people and how were you convinced to get the vaccine?
So I was, Anthony, you had dropped off. I was in the same boat you were. I was like, I want to know about this. I want to think about this. I want to take my time. And then one morning I was on a prayer call with Pastor Mike Walworm from First Corinthian Baptist Church in Harlem. And he talked about how talking to the congregation and talking to representatives from Harlem Hospital and other doctors that, we have to look at the numbers and how our community is being affected. And so when we look at those numbers and how many of us are dying at record numbers, that why wouldn't we lean into our faith in that moment? Why wouldn't we lean into our faith and knowledge of science to think that there is another possibility, there is another way? And so in that moment, that really changed my mind. And then I signed up on the New York State Gov site to get my vaccine, and I was going to get it later in March. And then Maria Davis, who many of you know, is an activist in the music industry. She's an HIV activist. She called me and said, hey, I have an opening. Do you want to come? Because we need your voice to be heard. We need you to be here. And so I say that to you, my brother, because we need your voice. We need you here. And so not to be like bandwagon, but I just think it's important that we change history. We change the narratives that we have been experiencing in history.
And Dre, what conversation? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Anthony. Go ahead, Anthony.
No, I'm all for us being healthy and living and, eating good and being healthy. I just have to, be educated, and I have to feel like speaking to someone I can trust. And, but I would feel really bad to lead someone to muddy water.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I wouldn't want that on my conscience either.
Yeah.
But I'm all for listening to the doctors, speak and speak from a passionate place, it makes a big difference, because a lot of times there are not a lot of us representing us in the field of science and in the medical field as strong and as prevalent as we see in other communities. So it makes a big difference, you know.
Definitely.
And I would like to add just about allergies, because it's a common question that I get, you know, if I have allergies, because I just want to remind you all that this is messenger RNA vaccine. This is not our previous live attenuated. So those allergies with eggs and chicken and environmental allergies, venom, bee stings, toxicities, hay fever, none of that applies here. The only thing that maybe we have to consider is the lipid emulsion that the messenger RNA is in contains something called polyethylene glycol. It's a long word, but it just means it's a type of fat that you find in laxatives like Miralax or Go Lightly. So if you've ever had an allergy to a laxative or stool softener, that would really be one of the only contraindications to getting this first shot. Even if you've had allergies to other vaccines, we're still recommending that you move forward with this vaccine, but make certain that you wait 30 minutes afterwards such that the physician or the nurse can observe you in case there is anything. But thus far, just remember, this is not a live virus. This is new technology. So all of those old allergies don't apply. And the last thing that I would add is that I do 1-minute videos where I answer one question on the COVID vaccine every day in under 60 seconds. It's called the Stairwell Chronicles. And you can follow those and see those at Dr. Jane Morgan, either on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn. It's JAYNE. And I take one question a day about the COVID vaccine and I answer it in under 60 seconds. Make it very easy to understand.
Dre, what have you been telling people to convince them since you've been vaccinated?
I've been telling them a lot of stuff. I've been just really trying to encourage people to get it. You know, for me, my next door neighbor who I grew up with, he's a doctor. His name is Thomas Butler. He was the one, you know, I reached out to a bunch of different, you know, people in the medical field. And when I spoke to him and just really kind of listened to him, like, speak on Clubhouse, he really convinced me, like, okay, this is something you should do. This is why I've done it. You know, no one should be afraid of it. You know, certain people do, you know, especially, you know, young kids do all types of, you know, lean and, you know, whatever type of drugs they want to do, but you can't go and get a vaccine to, you know, to help your community and stay safe. So there's a lot of things. I know the last administration, you know, they came out there, we're going to push a vaccine out. And that made a lot of people afraid because they really didn't trust the last administration. So, you know, it was moving so fast. So now it's here. And I think people are a little bit more, you know, understanding, especially with, you know, these two amazing doctors that we have on here to spread that message. So, you know, for me, it's just really just letting people know that, listen, I'm the one, I did it. I'll be the guinea pig. Trust me, I don't have a foot growing out of my neck, you know. You know, a chip inside of me. Like, how can you put a chip? Like, really? Come on, y'all. Like, let's grow up. Let's be real. Let's be adults. Let's get through this thing. And, you know, like I said, just do the research and ask a doctor, ask a professional. And so what Mr. Hamilton said, you know, just be aware. We don't want to lead people down the wrong road because they'll be like, see, that's what everyone's waiting for. See, I told you so. You shouldn't have did it. You know, but I think this will be okay. So.
Thank you, everyone. This has been very informative, and hopefully we got to most of the questions. But please try to find these people. If you need to speak to the doctors, find a doctor that you trust. Ask them questions. Get the information. Make an informed decision for you and your family. But most importantly, let's get the information, get correct information so that we can please go back to enjoying live music again, because that's what we want to do. You know, we want everyone to get back to business. We want to go out to eat with our families. We want to see our families, touch our families. So let's all just work together to get good. Right. Most of them. Let's work together to get great information, get the right information. Thank you so much to MusiCares and the Ad Council. And thank you to the panelists for all of this, for taking out the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having us.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions. Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.